Welcome to the Commonwealth Home Ownership Podcast, the real estate investing podcast for Canadians. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just getting started, you've come to the right place. If you're looking for a way to take control of your life through real estate investing, stay tuned and be sure to join us at cwho.ca, your hub for all things real estate investing in Canada.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Commonwealth Home Ownership Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is Phil Wong. With me as always is Brad Price. And today joining us, we have Dustin Hogan, who is a men's mental wellness counselor. And we thought this was a good time to have him on just because I feel mental health is something we don't really talk about very much as entrepreneurs. And, God knows we don't get enough of, mental health wellness during our hustle. So I thought it would be a good idea to have Dustin on to kind of, call us out on all the things that we're doing wrong and how we could be doing them better. So welcome, Dustin.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for joining us. I mean, this is a huge topic, and even more so with the last 12 months of lockdowns and just the whole pandemic that's been affecting people across the world. I mean, there's been noticeable increases in mental health issues, and there's been a lot of talk about it being related to just simply being locked at home. And I can't think of a better time to chat about this. And like Phil said, I mean, we're all guilty a little bit too of on the other end of the spectrum is just the whole hustle hard mentality and going at it all the time to create betterment and get ourselves to our visions and whatnot. So yeah, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Really looking forward to it. I think it's such an important topic to discuss, like you mentioned, especially as entrepreneurs, because we're not following the same kind of 9 to 5. We take our work with us to bed. It's there with us in the morning. It's there with us on the weekends. There's really no separating our lives from the work that we're doing. And while there's so many benefits to that, the flip side or the other side of that coin is oftentimes, entrepreneurs are significantly more stressed and dealing with things like mental health challenges than the general population, just because of the pressure that we put on ourselves. So I think it's a super important conversation to have.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man.
So Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this mental health counseling role?
Yeah, so I've had kind of an interesting career journey over the last 10 or 15 years. Grew up in Calgary, and then when I got working, started a landscaping business and built that up in the early 2000s. It was quite successful, but I wasn't getting joy from it. I wasn't inspired by it. I was just in it to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, I wanted to be doing something where I was getting up and excited about it. So at the same time that I was doing the landscaping business on the side, like my side hustle was DJing. So I was DJing all around Calgary at nightclubs, up till 3 o'clock in the morning, up at 7 o'clock in the morning, cutting grass. So there was certainly some painful mornings, to say the least. And I woke up one day, or actually I was driving one day to a landscaping job and realized, man, if I don't, what would happen if I put the same amount of effort into something I was passionate about as I am putting into this business? And like I said, at the time I was passionate about DJing. So packed up my life in Calgary, sold the landscaping business, sold my house, moved out to Vancouver, which is where I'm at right now, to go to music production school. So total change of pace. And then when I graduated from music school, I actually started teaching DJing and music production at a high school here in Vancouver, a school that catered to highly anxious kids that had a real struggle in the traditional high school stream. So I was so much passion, and I loved going into working with these students. And although I was teaching them DJing and music production, I was really teaching them about life skills. So this was my first step in the coaching world, so to speak, even though I didn't really know what a coach was at that time, or didn't even know I was coaching. But looking back, recognizing that that's what I was doing. So working at that school and working with kids for a couple of years, then I branched out, and then I actually started to pursue some coaching and speaking, started a series of workshops here in Vancouver, did that for about 3 or 4 years, pivoted that business because it wasn't taking off the way that I wanted it to. started speaking actually on behalf of another organization here in Vancouver. And from 2018 till almost 2020 was traveling all around Canada delivering presentations in schools again, but it was on social media and being safe online. And for me, it was such a powerful experience getting the chance to be in schools and talk to students about this stuff. But I also recognized the impact that it was making on my mental health, just because it was a grind. I mean, I was on the road doing upwards of, like, some weeks I did 25 presentations in a week. And as much as I loved the work, it just drained me, from the travel to the volume of presentations that I was doing to the intensity of the content, because a lot of the times I'd have to go into these schools because there was a bullying incident on Instagram, for example, that led to like a suicide. And it was heavy. It was heavy having to go in to have these conversations. And right around 2019, the end of 2019, that's when my mental health absolutely plummeted, dealing with intense anxiety, intense depression, even suicidal ideation. Like it was pretty intense. So I made the decision to kind of step back from everything that I was doing from a career standpoint, really ground myself and prioritize my own healing. And in that process, realize that I wanted to help others going through similar situations. And that's when I made the decision to pursue counseling. And it's been like a combination of all of these different life experiences now coming together to getting the chance to do what I'm doing right now as a men's mental wellness counselor. So yeah, it's been this like pinball journey getting to where I am right now, and some setbacks, some comebacks, some failures, some successes, and here we are today.
So Dustin, you talk about grounding yourself. Like, explain that for the listeners. How does somebody do that? What's the process there?
Oh man, do we have like 10 hours? Right? Like there's so many different ways to do that. But for what I'm talking about in that context, it was me just stepping back from that hustle and that grind of being on the road speaking, trying to build up this business as a speaker, to recognizing how much it was impacting my mental health. So thankfully I was in a position to be able to step away from that and really just reevaluate things. So that's what I mean by grounding myself. It's just like, okay, what are my priorities? Am I living my values here? Am I focused on self-care and really taking care of my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health? So I was able to get some distance from the work that I was doing to really focus on all of those different parts of my life. And what it allowed me to do was to just somewhat ground myself in the moment and really get perspective is probably a better way to describe it.
So Dustin, like, do you deal with a lot of entrepreneurs in your day-to-day practice?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like I got into this helping field, not necessarily knowing who I wanted to serve, but in the back of my mind, knowing that I potentially wanted to serve who I was 4 or 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Somebody that's driven, that's motivated, that wants to focus on their personal improvement, their, personal development, but still needed some support along the way. And oddly enough, that's the type of clientele that I've been attracting. Okay. You know what I mean? Not like across the spectrum, but I certainly see a lot of myself in the clients that I'm working with. People that are motivated, that are determined, that are driven, yet are still struggling with potentially some mental health issues, anxiety, depression, stress, self-esteem challenges, these types of things. So stuff that I've dealt with over the years, those are the kind of people that I've been working with. And it's been fascinating to see, especially those that are entrepreneurs, how much pressure we put on ourselves to succeed, because ultimately we're the only ones that we're accountable to, right? It's not like there's a boss there. It's not like there's somebody that's, checking our sheet at the end of the week to make sure that we've been in there. We're the only one that we're accountable. And like I said earlier, that's got two sides to that coin. On some sides it's beautiful because we've got that potential for freedom. But on the other side, if shit doesn't work out, who's the one to blame? Who's the one that's responsible? The person that's looking us back in the mirror. So to go back to your question is like, yeah, working with entrepreneurs is who I've been attracting, but not exclusively working with entrepreneurs or even people that are like entrepreneurial minded. Mm-hmm. So I work with people that have like a traditional 9-to-5, but they've got their side hustle. They're doing some music, they're doing some DJ, and they're building a business on the side. So it's more of that mindset. You know what I mean?
So, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
No, I was just going to ask: are you seeing common denominators with all these people? Like, is there a common denominator? And you talked about self-care, like for yourself, even you step back, you refocused, you gained a new perspective, but you talked about self-care in there, and I just wonder if there's some sort of correlation between maybe lack of self-care and like you say, just that consistent pressure that you're putting on yourself where, maybe, I don't know, things can be done better, but is there a common denominator you're seeing?
Yeah, so the self-care piece is huge. And it's a lack of self-care, and it's a lack of understanding what self-care is. Because oftentimes, I'll just speak for myself. When I first heard the term self-care, I thought that meant I needed to go to the spa for 5 hours. I needed to meditate under a tree for like a week. You know what I mean? I needed to like not use social media, only drinking green juice, all of these like woo-woo things. And certainly that could be part of self-care. However, self-care can be as simple as, before you're going into a meeting or presentation, just taking 5 minutes to close your eyes and just to focus in on your breath, because it's going to slow you down. It's going to calm your nervous system down. It's going to get you focused. Self-care could be something as simple as going for a walk during the day or after the day is done. It could be something like watching your favorite show on TV, engaging in, a conversation with somebody that you love and respect. It could be you going to the gym. It could be you eating healthy. So ultimately, when I'm working with my clients coming up with a self-care plan, I can certainly provide ideas and suggestions, but ultimately it's like, what's going to work for you, right? Even between the two of you guys, it's like, a way for you to relax, Brad, is probably different than for you, Phil, but they can both be considered self-care. So it's just choosing what's personalized to you. But then the big thing, and I know you guys will agree with this, is consistency. And it's the same thing when it comes to business. If you're not making sales calls, you're not going to make sales. If you're not knocking on doors, you're not going to find clients. And it's the same with self-care. If it's something that you're doing like once a month, probably not going to see a lot of benefit from it. But even if you can spend 5 minutes a day just focusing on something that's truly for yourself, you're going to see long-term benefits. And the cool thing is it's going to build up. It's going to build that momentum.
So Dustin, there's a lot of strategies and everyone has their own way of taking care of themselves, but what is the ultimate purpose of the self-care? Like, what is the goal of your self-care? What mindset, or what is the end result you're trying to achieve?
And I think that's where the gold is right there. There is no goal with it. And that's the hardest part for us as entrepreneurs, to recognize that not everything needs to be a goal that we're pursuing. And for me, that's been one of the hardest things to let go of, is engaging in self-care. I mean, you could say that there's a goal. It could be to improve your mental state, your emotional state, your physical state. So if you need to tie a goal to it, that's cool. But ultimately, there really is no goal, because you're filling that emotional gas tank, so to speak. Okay. And the more you fill it, the more that you've got to give. So it's a tiny little nuanced shift, but it's drastic if you actually think about it.
Okay, so it's just trying to, because I do a lot of things that make me feel better, right? The breathing exercises, the walks, you're just sitting watching TV, spending time with family, and those things all, I feel like, gets me to a better place where I can be more productive down the road. And but to me, like you don't really think about it as a goal, but the purpose is to basically make you basically just de-stress, I guess. De-stress, unwind,
and to really increase your capacity to be able to deal with the challenges that you're going to face in life. And those challenges that we're going to face as entrepreneurs is exponential compared to a lot of other people. Mm-hmm. So there's something in counseling that we call your window of tolerance. So if you basically think of a window, it's your ability to be able to tolerate things. And so as we get more stressed out, our window shrinks and shrinks and shrinks when the smallest thing sends you off, right? Something could be someone cutting you off. It could be somebody cutting in line at Starbucks. Something small all of a sudden sets you off. But if your window is tiny, your window to be able to tolerate with things, you're not going to be able to deal with them. So what self-care does, like if you want to think of it as a goal, it basically increases that window. Mm-hmm. So as we increase that window, we increase our capacity to be able to deal with the challenges that we face. And like I said, as entrepreneurs, those challenges are almost endless. So for me, just when I think of it, there's so much benefit in increasing our capacity to be able to deal with the shit that comes across our plate, because it's never ending. So really that's what self-care, at least from my perspective, is all about. Just increasing that capacity to be able to deal with the challenges that we face in life.
Yeah, I would also say that it provides really good benefits related to clarity when you're, maybe it is a situation or something that you've got to think your way through. It's almost like there can be some sort of brain fog when you're not taking care of yourself and you are just continually in that grind. It's almost like you've got blinkers on and you're running the race and you can't really see clearly what's around you. Yeah, you're still running for that finish line. You may or may not be able to see it, but you're almost blind to just other things that could potentially be even solutions or just a different directional route that you could take in a situation or for a scenario. So I just find that mental clarity is typically what also comes with the self-care. And I definitely personally have noticed it just over the years, going back quite some time when I was heavily involved with gym and boxing and just those different levels of fitness. I found there was correlation between those and just my mental clarity and my, I'll say, emotional stability, almost, in a sense. I just felt more level and almost happy in less of a term.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same, sort of similar to you, Brad. Did boxing and all that too, and I find like the endorphins that you get from the strenuous physical activity, I find that really buoys your mood a lot. And it kind of keeps you, as long as you keep engaging in this activity on a regular basis, I find that kind of makes you a lot more resilient to the stress, just because you have this little level of like higher level of baseline endorphins kind of just flushing through your system.
Yeah.
The balance is hard though. I think the balance is what I find that I really struggle with is trying to maintain some sort of balance between all the different facets of your life and what you have going on. So for example, when you think back to those times, Phil, like when I was boxing, I was training 5 nights a week and absolutely loving it. But therefore there were other things that were not getting looked after properly. And it's the same with like when we talk about entrepreneurship and business, when we're working and it's flat out, we're then not taking the time to go and do self-care. So like, Dustin, how do we get that balance, man?
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I've been toying with myself and with my clients is replacing the word balance with harmony, because balance is something that is almost unachievable, right? And there's a sense of like, I need to achieve this balance. Whereas like just having things be harmonious, I don't know, for me, it's just like a bit of a mental shift. So whether we're using harmony or balance, doesn't really matter. Ultimately, it just comes down to like what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I'd say, first and foremost, if somebody is not doing any sort of self-care, it's just like starting small, right? And taking the approach that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And even 5 minutes of self-care a day is going to benefit somebody, rather than saying like, okay, I need to change my entire life tomorrow morning. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock. And then what happens? A week later, they're not doing any of it. And they're probably regressed to even worse than when they were before they started that process. So for me, the big recommendation I have when I'm working with clients is just like baby steps. So starting small. And really choosing things like to find that balance is to choose those things that you're excited to do. You don't want it to feel like too much of a chore. I mean, I'm not here to say like I love getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym. I've learned to enjoy it when I get there, or tolerate it, so to speak. But initially there may be some of those growing pains, right? Anytime that we're uncomfortable, we just have to remind ourselves that we're growing. So if somebody isn't doing any sort of self-care and is trying to find some sort of balance, well, tomorrow when you start, it's probably not going to feel that great. It might not feel that great for the first couple of days, But if you can just start small and chip away at it, eventually it's going to start feeling better. And then you can start stacking on the second piece. And then once that becomes habitual, stack on the third piece. So it's just really understanding that these things take time, but being willing to commit for the long term. Because ultimately, you want it to become habitual the same way that brushing our teeth is, right? It's like we don't think about it. We know we got to do it, but we're not thinking about it that much anymore. We're just doing it. And it's the same thing with going for a walk, going to the gym, meditating, whatever somebody chooses to integrate.
Here's a question then. How do you know, or what are some signs that you require self-care? Because as a lot of entrepreneurs, they usually have the mindset is like, I'm a machine, I can crush this and keep going until it gets done, right? But so what are some signs that for those individuals who don't think they need self-care, what are some signs that are indicative that they might, should think about starting?
For sure. Yeah. Great question, Phil. I think the first sign that you may need self-care is asking yourself, do I need self-care? Like that'll be the first sign. I mean, obviously there's the like big obvious things like, you're tired, you're maybe feeling like burnt out. Is there anxiety that's typically wasn't present? Are you like stressed? Are you getting angry at people that are close to you for relatively small reasons? So those are kind of like more big obvious things. But going back to something that you said, Brad, is like if somebody's struggling to make decisions that perhaps they had an easier time making a couple of months ago, a year ago, that could be an indication that, you probably got to integrate some more self-care because you're lacking some of that clarity. If things are becoming just like a general sense of overwhelm, these are like certainly signs. So oftentimes when I'm working with my clients, it's like, okay, what's your body saying? Tap into the information that your body's giving you. And then second, like, what are your thoughts telling you and what are your emotions telling you? So there's all of these different signals that we as an entire human being give out. The problem is most of us aren't listening for those signals. We're just thinking that our shoulder is sore from some injury that maybe we had 20 years ago, or, our stomach hurts because of something that we ate bad last night. But the reality is these are like these little signals that our body is giving us, like, hey, wake up, you guys, like I'm listen to me, but we're just not listening to these signs.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, how is the online world affecting entrepreneurs in this day and age as well? Because I feel like, the self-care is obviously a major component. And, even just on a personal level, I totally agree that the consistency is key. It's not necessarily about just deciding that tomorrow we're going to go and hit this hard, and then we have to try to do our best to maintain that every single day. I guess over time, I've started to also develop in just my own habits, ways to slowly introduce things like different forms of self-care, but also to be able to look at it objectively and go, it's okay. I'm not going to do anything today. I've got all these appointments and I'm good with that. But I did something yesterday and I'm actually going to make sure that I do something tomorrow. And then I know I'm going to have another break in between and I'm going to do something the following day. So I'm almost kind of setting myself up for success where I'm not booking it in every 24 hours and then trying to hold myself to account to the point where it's not going to happen. But, once you kind of get that under control, what about these other factors that are out there like social media and online issues that are affecting us? Like, how is that playing into it?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have seen the documentary, This Social Dilemma on Netflix. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, you realize that these platforms are built to keep us hooked on them, right? To give us that little dopamine hit, to keep us coming back, checking the notifications. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's in like very small doses. Yet it's when it becomes, the scroll where you're scrolling for like an hour or 2 hours and time has just flown by and you don't even really know what you've looked at. So one of the things that I've tried to adopt myself is looking at these, social media, Instagram, Facebook, places where we need to be to do our business as simply that, just tools to do business on, not necessarily, tools to consume. And one of the things that was shared to me by a past mentor is like the difference between creation and consumption. And oftentimes when we get onto social media, we're in consumption mode. And the worst thing is we're doing it unconsciously. So it's unconscious consumption. So we're not even aware of what we're doing. We're just taking it in. We're just taking it in. And so often what can happen, and I'll just speak, from myself with Instagram, man, I found myself in that comparison trap over and over and over again. Right. Well, this guy is doing this and I started before him, so I should be far further than him. Or why is she on a vacation? I deserve a vacation. And this is happening like hundreds and hundreds of times, probably a minute. And unfortunately, what that does is it really plays with our sense of self-worth, our sense of self-esteem, all of these different components that build us up and build up our mental and emotional health. So I'm not saying to anybody, get off social media or get off the internet. It's just like, what is your intention behind using it? And can you commit to just sticking to that intention and not letting it use you? You use it as a tool, but don't let it use you, so to speak.
And Brad, I think we've had a discussion a few times with social media, and I think we both more or less just kind of strictly use it just for work now. I don't know about you, Brad, but like
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because it's that exactly what Dustin mentioned there. You do find yourself just being consumed by it without necessarily realizing it at the time.
I haven't used social media in close to a decade now, actually, like actively been on it, just because, a little bit about my background. Like I moved away from, I went to graduate university. I moved away to a small town, Canmore, for a little while, where I knew nobody. And every time I go on social media, there's a lot of like that FOMO, missing out. All your friends or your families doing all this stuff, and I'm just by myself, no friends, no family, and you just kind of fall into this little bit of a melancholy, minor depression every time I go on social media and see all the things that's happening that's back home. And then I found that, even some days I started noticing more and more often. Some days I wake up on a weekend and it's like, I feel great, a good night's sleep, bright sunny day, and everything's great. And then you go on social media and then immediately I feel like shit.
Yeah.
Right. And then I noticed that over and over. And then after that, I just stopped. I just went cold turkey after that, after a little while. And I found my mood significantly increased, even though, and then, I can actually focus on trying to build my life in this new town, as opposed to trying to thinking back to all the things I'm missing out on at home.
Yeah.
And then, I think that's really true. It just kind of really, messes with your sense of self-esteem and worth. It's brutal.
For me, it's more of it was part of more of my self-care development, actually. Just before we started recording, we were kind of just chatting about the crazy week that it's been, and it's only Wednesday. And, the way I started to look at it and go, you know what, like there are so many things going on right now. And I've got young kids upstairs and my better half, obviously. And, there's not enough time in the day to fit as much of those things in there as you want to. And then you've got social media that you find yourself wasting time on. So for me, that was really, stepping back and looking and going, okay, where am I actually allocating my time and what can I do better? And one of the things that I looked at first and foremost was social media. And I said, you know what, I same as Phil, we should be using this for business because it's almost just a requirement these days. But at the same time, I've got family that I could be spending that time with. So that's for me the reason that I decided to step back from social media, was to better allocate my time as I see. I mean, some other people might say, well, I need to be on social media for other reasons, and that's fair enough too. But personally, from a personal perspective, that was why I stepped away from social media.
So Dustin, is there any advice that you can give our listeners in terms of how they might be able to improve if they find that social media is kind of affecting their mental health, any way they can kind of slowly, maybe not go cold turkey, but slowly move away from it, at least, any strategies to help improve that situation?
Yeah, I think it comes down to kind of a few phase plan. First and foremost is just what is the content that you are consuming on there, right? So if it's if it's inspirational or educational, that's one thing. But if it's like celebrity gossip and those types of things, well, they're gonna do different. They're going to have different impacts on your overall sense of self. So first, just take a look at the type of content that you are consuming, and just see how that could be playing into it. And then similar to what we talked about earlier is just those baby steps. You know, maybe if you're on there 2 hours a day, start going on there an hour and a half a day, and then an hour a day, and then 30 minutes, you know, but taking your time, because here's the thing, social media, or, you know, the online world as a whole is oftentimes affecting like the same reward centers in our brain that hard drugs are, right? You're getting the same kind of hit, the same kind of high. And if you're to stop, you know, stopping drugs cold turkey is obviously going to impact you. And it's relatively the same when it comes to social media. So don't be surprised if you're going to have like withdrawal symptoms or craving it, or even like, you know, especially because I work so much with students and they're spending like 8 to 10 hours a day on social media. And I'd heard of some students that had like ghost scrolling, you know, they didn't even have their phone, but they're just like, their thumb is just going. And even here in Vancouver, just down across the border in Washington, there are like social media detox centers, video game addiction detox centers, because it's becoming a very, very real thing. So if somebody is like fully into it and feels like it's maybe at an addictions level, you don't want to stop cold turkey. You want to, just like you would anything else, wean yourself off of it.
Okay. There was a documentary actually I watched quite recently where a gentleman was interviewing a young lady who obviously clearly had an addiction to social media, and in summary, she literally could not communicate with the gentleman that was interviewing her. It was quite shocking, actually. They asked if they could take her phone off her for just a few minutes to have a conversation, because she literally couldn't bring herself to look at the gentleman for longer than about 6 or 7 seconds. So they took the phone away from her with her permission, and the anxiety that was going through her body was clear through the TV. It was unbelievable. And I when I watched that, I thought about my daughters, and it concerns me. It majorly concerns me about what the future looks like, because how do you separate technology devices from kids these days? I mean, they spend all day at school pretty much on computers, plus then they have their devices from when they're not on their computers, on their screens. Like, short of just taking your kids and living out in the forest, what can you do?
First of all, Brad, what was that name? What's the name of the documentary? I'm curious now.
I would have to look it up so I don't get it incorrect, Phil.
Okay.
There's been a few that I have watched, because it is something that I'm very I'm interested in. I really am, you know, and it's even made me start to look at just different businesses. Are there businesses out there that can survive without social media these days, and what are they? You know, even that interests me to the point where you know, just from a different bit of a side note, is does every business need social media to survive these days? Because when you think about the pandemic and so many things are online, I mean, we're doing real estate deals where we're signing documents virtually now with our lawyer. I mean, the world is changing drastically and dramatically from even just 10 years ago. So
though I am grateful for that last bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many pros to it as well. But
the
just
cons
from how do we separate the pros from the cons and the mental health impacts that Dustin, you're dealing with all of the time? I mean, I know that's the big question, but I mean, what else can we do, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deep pit to go down. And I know, like, I'm just thinking back to the days when I was traveling around to schools, and then when I would do parent presentations and they would come up to me with the same, you know, kind of tone of their voices, like, well, what can we do? Like, the world is so digital right now. And if the kids aren't online, they're going to be left behind, but, you know, fearful if they are online, what's going to happen? And ultimately, I'll go back to what I said earlier, is these are simply just tools, right? Social media is a tool. Computers are a tool, our devices are a tool, the same way that a hammer is a tool, right? You can take a hammer and you can build a beautiful house. You can take that same hammer and smash every window in that house. It just depends how we're using it. And I mean, Brad, for you with two little ones, it's like, yeah, just working to teach them that that's a tool, and it can be a tool for their success, or it can be a tool to kind of tear life down. And I've seen it do both. It really just comes down to that. And I would love to see it get to the point where, you know, similar to all of us getting our driver's license and having to go get like driver's training, to me, it should be the same when it comes to social media, the online world. And we're not just talking about kids here. Like, some of the things adults post online blows my absolute mind. And then we see that on a regular basis. So ultimately, it just comes down to really using these as tools. It just depends how we're using them.
Okay, that's good advice. Let's shift gears a little bit here. Back to entrepreneurship. You know, the whole idea about the hustle, right? The respect the hustle. The whole idea around you gotta hustle hard to get to your goals. But then there's a whole, on the flip side of that, there's the grit, right? You want and this research has shown, I think we've discussed earlier, Angela Duckworth and her book Grit, how the grit is like the sole determinant of success, regardless of IQ, socioeconomic status, all those other things. So where does grit become dangerous? In the sense that, you know, you need grit to succeed, but then at the same time, like, where does it, where do you draw the line to you know, when it gets too much and it starts impacting other aspects of your life? Like, I don't know if that came across really well, that question.
No, I pick up what you're putting down, man. And I think this is a beautiful opportunity for us to distinguish grit versus hustle, because they're two very, very different things, right? I mean, you mentioned Angela Duckworth, and we spoke about her before. And I mean, her definition of grit is passion and perseverance towards long-term goals, right? Nowhere in that definition does she say that needs to be passion and perseverance 18 hours a day. She's just saying persevere and have passion towards what it is you're working towards, right? And I think somewhere along the lines, this hustle culture that we're so deep into right now has maybe, stolen the word grit, and kind of now a lot of people look at them synonymously. But I think grit is such a powerful characteristic from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint, and beyond, because that ability to just keep persevering, keep putting one foot in front of the other, is someone's going to find a lot of success if they integrate that philosophy into their life. On the other hand, hustle is this idea of like 2 hours of sleep a night, 3 hours of sleep a night. You've got like 50 things on the go, right? This is like the ultimate multitasker, doing a million different things, kind of charging forwards towards their goals. And here's the deal. I'm not opposed to hustle whatsoever. It's just over the long term, it's just not a strategy. It comes back to the whole idea of like working smarter than working harder, right? Like, you think of somebody like even Gary Vee, right? We've all heard of Gary Vee. He seems to be like the king of hustle. And before I really knew a lot about him, I'm like, oh my God, this guy must sleep like 2 hours a night. You know, he's got like all of these businesses on the go. And then I listened to a podcast with him where he talked about some nights he gets 4 hours of sleep, some nights he gets 10 hours of sleep. He sleeps the amount that he needs to get what he needs to get done, but not every night he's sleeping 4 hours a night. And when I heard Gary Vee, who I thought is the king of hustle, say that, I'm like, okay, sure, I could have some nights where I'm, like grinding it out, burning the midnight oil, but to have that as a sustained strategy over the long term is like a quick way to burn out. So I think it's like using this hustle mentality in short bursts, but then recognizing that you need time to charge. It's the same way as a rechargeable battery and the idea of like willpower, right? A rechargeable battery has only got so much juice in it. Once it's out of juice, though, there's no way to keep using it. You need to recharge it. And it's the same thing with willpower. It's the same thing with hustle. It's like use it in short bursts to maybe build some momentum or get a lot of shit done in a quick amount of time, but then recognize you're going to need some time to recharge with self-care, and that's going to really build that battery back up. So not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, I thought there was just such importance there to distinguish like grit compared to hustle.
No, I think that's good. I mean, from what I got from your answer, then it's hustle when you need to, but maintain that long-term vision too. But that's pretty much where the grit comes in, right? Where where every day of hustle might not get you to your goals, but as long as you keep working at it, then you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, and I think with sorry to interrupt there, Brad, but
that's right.
Yeah, I think because I'm just on this point right now, I think grit and resilience are like the perfect combination, because grit is going to like keep you moving forward, but resilience is that ability to bounce back when stuff does not go the way that you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can combine those two characteristics together, to me, that's like the ultimate combination.
Yeah, I was just going to refer back to your term harmony. I mean, your harmony is going to be different for everybody, but it's almost you're really listening to yourself in terms of, if you need more sleep in an evening, you simply need more sleep to maintain your harmony, your balance, right? So, but also just with the hustle perspective, I think as entrepreneurs, we're a little bit guilty sometimes of thinking that being busy all the time is also being productive, which that takes me to almost prioritizing, being able to prioritize and maintain consistency, and maybe work less during the day, but just that consistency day after day, week after week, year after year is really what's going to help build your business for the long term without you being burnt out. I mean, is that something that you're helping people with, is trying to, it's almost like take a breath, slow down. Your business is, you're not going to build it overnight. It's going to take some time. So you may as well just get yourself into a mode whereby you can sustain what it is that you're doing so that you can achieve what you're trying to achieve.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that the people that you guys are working with are trying to build like long-term sustainable success and sustainable freedom over the long term, right? And ultimately that's what it comes down to. And it's so interesting, talking to entrepreneurs, not across the board, but certainly a lot of people that I talk to, and thinking like, well, I don't have time for self-care. And it's like, I don't have time to take a breath. Well, that's the reason to take a breath. If you take a breath, it's going to give you the capacity to take 15 more breaths. But if you don't take this one because you've got like two things in front of you, well, you're going to get those done, but then you're just not going to have the juice left to keep moving forward. And like, it can be such like small little moments to just to settle in. And we have to keep in mind, right, this device up in our head, our brain, it only has so much capacity. And when we overwhelm it, we're not going to be able to accomplish those long-term visions and that long-term freedom. So it's really just having that, I don't know, that perspective to just, like, as cheesy as it is, to like stop and smell the roses and then put your foot on the gas again. But making sure that you're integrating. And oftentimes, even just like let's say a client that I'm working with that has, a one session a week with me, for example, that 1 hour, they're not working on their business, they're working on themselves. Even if they're just venting to me for an hour, I don't even say anything half the time. And they're like, oh, that was so great. I'm like, well, dude, I didn't do anything. I just sat here and smiled and nodded along and, I provided some empathy. But oftentimes that's all that it really needs to be.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how does somebody go about starting that conversation, and who do they start it with? Like, because it can be, I don't know, almost a bit of an overwhelming thing to say, you know what, I think I need to have a conversation with somebody. Who do I have a conversation with? So because obviously just getting it off your chest can sometimes help.
It's huge. I mean, and think about it. We're doing it right now. 3 dudes talking about like feelings and shit. Right? This doesn't typically happen. But it's situations like this, just having the conversation, I mean, of course, I'm a proponent for seeking out therapy with a counselor or a psychologist or even just your doctor. But if that seems like too big of a step, find somebody that you're close to. Could be a friend, could be a family member. And it doesn't need to be this big, like opening your heart and crying and all of these different types of things. Oftentimes it's just like a simple conversation to just get that ball rolling. And on the other side of things is being that person in your friend group that reaches out to your other friends just to say, hey man, how you doing? Because I cannot tell you the number of times when I've been having like a down day or something just seems like it's not going right, and I'm stuck in my head, and the whole world seems to be crumbling in, and then I get a text from somebody who says, hey man, what's going on? It's like takes me right out of that, you know. And now all of a sudden I'm having a conversation and just engaging. I'm not really talking about the stresses that I'm feeling. I'm just opening up. So it goes both ways. It goes, you know, people stepping out and having the courage to share their truth. But then on the other side, being that type of person that reaches out to those in your community just to say, hey, what's going on, to friends, to family, to whomever. Person at Starbucks, hey, how you doing today? You know, that it goes a long, long way, because most of us are fighting a battle that nobody knows about.
I feel there's still a lot of stigma surrounding, you know, mental health. I mean, there's, you know, it's definitely getting better with all the awareness in the community that's happening, but I still feel like there's a lot of stigma. So I think it's important to know, like I want to ask this question too, like what benefit would a counselor provide versus just talking to a friend? Like what strategies or what I guess what services can a counselor provide with their training to get you to someplace faster versus just talking to a friend? Because I think a lot of people don't really know what they don't know, so they don't really think about engaging a counselor because they don't see the benefit of it, you know, from their perspective.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I mean, I could go on and on about that, but first and foremost, it's like you're going to get this third party that doesn't know your background, doesn't know your history, is just there to listen, but has the education and the experience to understand where your blocks might be, where you may not even recognize that they are. Because at the end of the day, like a counselor, a therapist is not there to provide advice. Like I'm not there to provide advice for my clients. I'm really there as like a collaborator and a contributor to the path that they're on, asking the right questions at the right times for you to be able to come to your understanding. Because if I tell you to do something, as opposed to you figuring out that you need to do something on your own, it's going to be much more beneficial that way. So providing that space to just be able to open up, to do so like in a structured conversation, so to speak, is really just going to provide that value. And there's like for me personally, it's odd. You know what I mean? You think about like the people that are close to you, like being able to share your deepest, darkest secrets with, but oftentimes it's like easier to do with a stranger in the most bizarre, it's so bizarre when you think about it, but having that third party that really understands psychology, understands mental health, understands how to support somebody in a crisis situation or even a non-crisis situation, there's just so much value in that. And the big piece that really comes is that non-judgmental, completely open environment and safe space that a counselor or therapist creates. And of course, all of us are going to have our own different style. Like I've got a different style than, you know, my colleagues. And it really just comes down to finding somebody that you connect with and that you resonate with.
I was going to ask you actually, like, it is bizarre that sometimes, you know, we may feel more confident in divulging information to a complete stranger, but it also makes me think, well, maybe because we don't care what they think, rather than we do care what our friendship groups or our family thinks if we tell them, and we're worried that we might get in trouble or they may look at us differently, rather than just not, you know, it doesn't make us a certain person. It's just the issue is the problem, or you know, the way we're feeling is the problem, regardless. It doesn't change us as a human. Yeah. Like how does that play into friendship circles, and how do we know, in a sense, that, you know, our friends are really our friends if we don't feel confident enough to go and tell them? You know, it's like when you do something and you've succeeded with something, or you get a deal done, or whatever it is that you're super excited about, and you tell a friend and they're like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. It's like, all you're really looking for is like, that's awesome, right? Like that's what it makes me think of, you know?
Well, fuck you too.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, how do we, I mean, is it better to just go and speak with somebody you don't know, or should you start with your friends first? Or how do you decide? Like,
Yeah, and another good question, man. Like to me, it's a bit of both because I've certainly got friends in my circle that I can share anything with. You know, obviously my wife, my family, but I've had to work up to that point. It's almost like I found that courage in the therapy room when I'm working with a therapist and I'm the client. And then it's like given me the confidence to now go out and share it with those that are closest to me. Because I know that that therapist, like they have no vested, well, they've got a vested interest in me doing well as a client and as a human, but you know, me not liking the way that they put the dishes away or the way that my wife puts the dishes away or the way that, you know, like something like that, it doesn't affect the therapist. So it's like they're completely like coming from an unbiased place, and they're not there to make, you know, somebody else right or wrong. They're not there to make me right or wrong. They're just there to allow me to kind of like put it together. And there's this beautiful photo that I've got that I often share with clients, and it shows like the client on one side, and it's got like their head, and it just looks like this like tie, like this yarn that's just like crisscrossed. And then you've got the therapist sitting on the other side of the photo, and they're there just like beautifully unraveling these knots. And to me, that's really what it is. It's just like this collaborative environment where you feel the space is safe enough to be able to share that. And then sure, you can take it out and start to share it with other people. But with that said, that's not like the only path to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that share a ton with their friends, but then are just looking for some additional, more like structured support. That's when you would bring in like a professional.
Yeah, right on. And is it, I guess there's a bit of a segue here. We want things right away, Dustin.
I was just gonna go there too.
No
you know,
kidding.
it's almost like, hey, you know, you chat to your friends about an issue or something that's going on, and you're like, by the way, this is happening tomorrow. You know, so I need some feedback or some advice, or what are your thoughts? And
I want everything. I wanted it yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, so I mean, is that a general consensus these days with the people that you're working with, or are you is it a common thread right now? Is this, we hear about it all the time, is this instant gratification is the term we hear, but are you seeing that play a role right now in mental health issues?
And yeah, the reason I'm kind of like laughing right now is because you guys will like this, because predominantly I work with men, right? And just generally speaking, we're fixers. It's like everything's a problem and we need to figure out a way to fix it, right? Everything's a nail and we're a hammer. We just got to like hammer it in. So it's so fascinating to me that across the board with my clients, like they'll come to me with anxiety or depression or relationship challenges or communication issues, whatever it might be. And typically the response is like, okay, yeah, like we'll talk about it a bit, but just like give me some strategies to be able to like figure this out. Like just tell me how to fix it. And I laugh because I'm the exact same way. When I'm sitting in their seat as the client working with my therapist or counselor, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's talk about it, but just like tell me how to fix it. So it's a challenge, man, because, and especially as entrepreneurs, right? It's like that delayed gratification is a hard pill to swallow. But when it comes to therapy and counseling specifically, I think of it like going to the gym, right? You would not expect to go to the gym tomorrow to lift some weights and all of a sudden look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? You may wish that to happen, but logically and rationally, you just know that that's not possible. And it's the same thing when it comes to having a therapeutic conversation, is it's going to take some time to unravel that, you know, knot of thread that is in our minds. But the hardest thing to do, and one of the hardest parts of my role, is to just have to remind my clients of that on a continuous basis. But the cool thing is once you start to see a little bit of that momentum build, you start feeling a bit more grounded, a little bit clearer, those types of things, then you recognize that you are building towards something. There's not like necessarily a finish line, because there's always new ways that we can grow. However, you start to build that capacity to just deal with the stresses of life, you recognize that it is about that like long-term vision.
Yeah, and I think if you can establish some form of I'll say level of patience too. You know, you take that step back, you gain a fresh perspective, and if you can kind of generate that harmony, um, that increased patience, it's almost like it results in opportunities more regularly, I want to say. I don't know, it's just a personal experience, is that once I kind of personally got things, you know, we'll say more balanced or better harmonized, I just found that results were a little more consistent as well. Opportunities were a little more consistent, just you know, in kind of all factors of life, all facets of life. But even just from a business perspective, I feel as though opportunities were more consistent. And I don't know, what are your thoughts, Phil, on, because I know you've worked on that a bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because you're so overworked, so overstressed, you're trying to fit everything in, you might not even have the bandwidth to recognize opportunities when they do show up. So when you're able to kind of back off a little bit and, you know, and step back and just be able to smell the roses, so to speak, you're opening up some more of that bandwidth. So now you can start recognizing those opportunities that were probably there all the time, but you just weren't able to recognize them because you're so inundated with everything else. So yeah, I mean, I think that might be where you feel like, you know, opportunities are more consistent, just because you're just a little bit more open to seeing them now, as opposed to being in the grind the whole time. So at least that's how I feel too. I mean, sometimes you can just take a step back, right? You just, you know, things like, you know, you maybe have an email from a contact that you just ignored because you just didn't have time to deal with it, for example, and that could easily turn into an opportunity if you had responded to it in a timely manner. Yeah, I think that's a good example. Right?
I think we've probably all been guilty of that, for sure.
A few times.
Yeah. And you know what? And you know what? On the subject of delayed gratification, like I know some people are familiar with this, but the whole marshmallow test, I think there was a whole study revolving around that. Was there not?
Yeah, the marshmallow experiment. So
yeah.
Not sure when it was, if it was in the 40s or 50s.
This is the 70s, I thought.
70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I read it anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, there's incredible videos on YouTube about it, actually. If you Google the marshmallow experiment, and yeah, I mean, really, it talks about this idea of delayed gratification, right? So for those of you that haven't seen the video yet, basically what they do is they put these cute little kids in a room, and they've got you know, the scientist there, or the lab person, and they basically put a marshmallow in front of these kids, and they say, okay, you know, little Brad, little Phil, if you don't eat this marshmallow, I'm going to come back and then I'm going to give you 2. But then they don't tell the kids when they're going to come back. So they leave the room, and of course they're filming the whole thing. And to see these kids squirm and jump and staring at the marshmallow and like literally talking out loud, trying to convince themselves, okay, don't eat it, don't eat it, don't eat it. And sure enough, some of them don't eat it. The experimenter comes back in, gives them the second marshmallow, and then within 2 seconds, they just down those. And then other kids, as soon as that experimenter leaves the room, they eat that marshmallow like right away. And sure enough, they followed up with these kids when they were adults, you know, 20 or 30 years later. And those that did have the ability to delay gratification and not eat that marshmallow were significantly more successful from an education standpoint, from a career standpoint, on all of these different measures. And of course, there's probably other factors at play, but just this idea of being able to delay gratification, I think there's so much value in that. It's a beautiful characteristic to develop, just like grit is, just like resilience is. They're kind of in the same family, I would say.
I might have to try that with my kids, so I know whether or not I need to increase the portfolio.
That's right.
for their future.
My friend was able to teach it to her dog.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole marshmallow test, to tell her not to eat it, and she would walk away, and they filmed the whole thing. It's really pretty cool. It's crazy how well trained.
So cool.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we're just being cognizant of time here, Dustin. What is, I guess, 1 or 2 pieces of advice you can give entrepreneurs moving forward to kind of you know, be in a better place, get to a better mental state if they're you know, if they find that they're struggling at this point?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost is just recognizing that being an entrepreneur can be a lonely path, right? I mean, for you guys, like you've got a partner that you can bounce ideas off of, but for many entrepreneurs out there, they're rocking that solopreneur journey. So it really comes down to those individuals that are just running a one man or a one woman show to make sure that you've got a support system around you, to get connected to communities like the ones that you guys are building, because that's another unfortunate thing about entrepreneurship is the only people that understand the journey that you're on is other entrepreneurs. There's nothing more challenging than trying to describe what you did during your day to somebody that is just a 9-to-5er, because they don't understand. What do you mean you were answered emails for 4 hours and had a meeting, right? Like these things don't compute. So first and foremost, because it is such a lonely solo journey at times, is try to just develop a support system, especially now, right? I mean, thankfully we're starting to come out of the disconnection that we've had over the last year and a half, but it's so important to just surround yourself with as many people that are going down a similar or the same journey as you, because you're going to be able to have that support. You're going to be able to reach out. You're going to be able to have that compassion and empathy because other entrepreneurs get what you're going through. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just, as I know, as hard as it is going to be, to really just recognize that it is a long-term journey. It is a marathon, not a sprint. And yes, there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be comebacks, there's going to be pivots, but just recognizing that if you just keep that long-term vision in mind, you're going to get there eventually. Like I even think about just the last 5 years with my business, right? I went from hosting my own workshops to traveling around Canada to speaking, to going back and getting educated as a coach and a counselor and launching my counseling practice. And that's in a span of 5 years, right? And there's this line from Tony Robbins that I always remind myself of. And it's this, we overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. And I think it really ties into that idea of delayed gratification, right? Just have that long-term vision in mind, and you're going to get where you need to go. It may not happen in the timeline that you want. It may not happen to the level of success that you want right away. But to me, quitting is when you give up. And if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to get there at some point.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Dustin, this is a super important conversation, man. And honestly, it's been fantastic. I feel like we could talk for hours, the way we're going here. But if somebody wants to reach out, mate, and have a conversation with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you can check me out on my website. It's dustinhogan.com. You can find me on Instagram at I am the authentic man. And yeah, reach out to me. Happy to jump on a call, discovery call, whatever it looks like, but happy to support in any way I can.
Awesome, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks guys. Really appreciate it.